Hello everybody, this is Countdown VHS. Today we're going to do a tier list. This is the low-hanging fruit of YouTube content, and I thought I could throw one together, and we'll see what we come up with here. I'm going to go with a tier list. This one is going to be of strength of the factions. So basically ease of play, how easily can you put this faction together into a powerful setup. Now this is going to be a little weird because there are some factions that are really strong in some areas, really weak in others, but we're just going to get into it. I guess we'll explain as we go. First off, we've got the faction of Khand. This is a really fun faction, but they're very idiosyncratic, almost entirely horse archer focused. That's where your strength is going to be. You, of course, have decent other units, but you really have your strength in the horse archers. And so for that reason, I'm going to put that up in the if you know category. Now, what this means is if you're playing normally, like a normal human being, and you just start up a faction as Khand and you try to use, whatever is available to them, you're going to have, maybe a middle of the road time. I'm going to put them down into the equivalent of C tier. They could work for you. But if you are a horse archer aficionado, then you can stomp things with this faction. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So you can field a pretty large, almost exclusively horse archer army, send it out, and just wreak havoc. So Khand is going to go up into that S tier, if you know. Harandor. Okay, these guys get a lot of bad press, I guess you could say. In the very early stages of the mod, when it was first released about 10 years ago, I guess this year, is that right? 2015, is that right? Yeah, Harandor had a reputation for being like the hardest faction in the mod. That's no longer the case. There have been some updates, of course, since then that have made Harandor quite a bit more competitive. Its position in the south is difficult, but I'm going to put them here in the could work category. This is a faction that you can do fairly well if you go after Harad early. That means you got to drive south. You've got to pretty much commit to that. But you can have some success because you can take over the very wealthy, very productive settlements around Umbar. And once you've done that, then the faction of Harad is not really a problem for you anymore. And furthermore, you've got a pretty defensible northern frontier. You're going to be harassed by the Reunited Kingdom and or Adunabar, but you can hold the bridge, or more specifically, the tile immediately south of that bridge, which is a very nice high slope that is much easier to defend than the bridge itself, considering that your early armies in particular are going to be very light. So Harandor, I'm going to put this in. They can be okay, but wouldn't recommend it for new players. Okay, the Beornings. Beornings, I'm also going to put them. I'm put them in C tier. Now I'm going to put them a little bit higher. Can I do that? Yeah, we're going to put them right here. These guys have a tough time once they get going, and by get going I mean you conquer Dale, the Lonely Mountain, that triangle between the rivers Carnan and Kelduin. You've got a pretty secure corner of the map at that point. Getting there can be difficult, depending on how you do it. Again, if you're playing sort of as a normal person, these guys are going to present you with an interesting change from say, Harandor in terms of just the cost of your units. The Beorning units are super cheap, but they don't get a lot better. They've got a very low ceiling, so you get 3 tiers of military development. Your best stuff is going to be aggressive, very low defense axemen, until you start conquering. You get into other regions. You get in the Dale region, you're going to find some retainer spearmen. You're going to have an easier time holding the line with units like that. But for the most part, you're going to have low armor, sort of charge-focused, fear-focused units, which are fun to play with, but they're not the easiest thing to work with for someone who is maybe new to the mod. So I'm going to put them down here. Late game, they can be fun, but the fun exists as a function of your ability to defeat far superior armies. So that's why they go there. Dunland. Dunland is a strong faction. This may seem a bit of a surprise. I'm putting them in the equivalent of A tier here. But Dunland, like the Beornings, has extremely cheap units. and you can field a ton of them. Your population's good, your growth is good. You've also got a very secure area of the map. Your neighbors to the north and west are busy with each other for a long time. That consists of 3 factions. It's Tharbad, it's the Reunited Kingdom, and it's Adunabar. And those guys are all fairly weak in that part of the map, at least in the early into the mid-game. So you've got some time, in other words, to ignore that front and basically invade Rohan. Deal with Rohan, and then your economy just blasts off even more than it does initially because you get Helm's Deep, you get Edoras, you get a couple of other provinces there. I like to get down to Aldburg, and that is a nice choke point or a nice holding point for a while against the Reunited Kingdom. And you get towards the Anduin, you can hold off against other units. Dunland does get tricky in the late game because you end up facing, let's say, maybe a massive Adunabar or a massive Reunited Kingdom in the south, and they have better archers. Your units, like the Beornings, again, are mostly lightly armored and ranged. So you've got a lot of ranged options, which to me makes them a pretty easy play. So don't underestimate Dunland. They're a lot of fun. Okay, now Reunited Kingdom, I'm going to put them in the B tier. And I'm going to put them here sort of as a cautionary tale. Now, if you're watching this video, you are almost certainly a subscriber to the channel. You've played this mod for 1,000,000 years already. So you know what I mean, perhaps, but maybe you'll disagree, and I'm interested to see why. I'm not a huge fan of the Reunited Kingdom, just as a player, most of the time. I can get into that headspace, but it's not where I like to be. I like to be with the faster, lighter, harder hitting factions. And the Reunited Kingdom is neither fast nor light nor particularly hard-hitting, you could argue. They do have access to some fantastic units, of course. They've got catapults, which is a huge thing. They've got longwomen, of course, and they've got a very good all-around military, especially as regards the infantry. But the economy is terrible. In the initial campaign, you'll have a hard time growing your cities relative to some other factions. And you can get into trouble. You can get into sort of a slog situation. So they're a lot of fun, don't get me wrong, but I think new players may jump into 4th Age and think, all right, I'm going to play Gondor. This is going to be awesome. And they can struggle. So for that reason, I'm going to put them in the B tier. Adunabar. Adunabar's tough, I think. I'm going to put them down here, and it's going to be on the low end of could work. Adunabar has a very similar roster. They're interesting because they're, in a lot of ways, the mirror image to the Reunited Kingdom, but you're going to have a tough time. You're in the middle of the map as much as anyone can ever be thought to be in the middle of anything. Adunabar is in the middle of the map for the 4th Age. For those of you who are maybe watching this video and are completely new to the mod, I don't know why you would, but anyway, here we go. Adunabar is a faction that is created by the modders to represent a split in the Reunited Kingdom, a sort of a cultic turn. Now, you don't have to play them as a cultic faction, but they are initially set up that way, and so that means you're going to be using mostly units like dark bows, dark swords. You've got a few cavalry units. You've got a few Ways of the West style units as well, the more traditional Dunedainic longbowmen, and you can turn in that direction, but that itself is rather tricky. Almost all of your units are expensive, with the notable exception of the orcs that you can train. That's where you can get some very, very cost-effective garrison troops, as well as some cost-effective just, running around units, like your Uruks, essentially, can be frontliners for your eastern frontier. And they can even, in the form of your Orcish champions, can even go toe-to-toe, or certainly be devastating in a flank attack against other Dunedainic troops. But, much like the Reunited Kingdom, the difficulty with the Adunabar is the economy and the strategic problem. You're just surrounded on all sides. So take this if you want a challenge. Tharbad. Tharbad. I'm gonna put you as my don't, as my don't. Now, I know that some people love Tharbad. I am gonna give them a play at some point. If you play Tharbad like a normal person, you, let's say, start up the campaign. You look around. You notice that you're not at war with anybody. You're not allied with anybody. Okay, maybe you get the hint from the lore that we've written for the faction, which says that you are a breakaway, essentially a city-state that's declared independence given the fact of the Dunedainic Civil War and the fact that you're, refounding a bastion of trade on the Grey Flood, and you're thinking, okay, I'm just going to stay neutral to everybody, and I'm going to trade with everybody, and I'm going to not attack any major factions for a while, and I'm going to go to the rebel provinces, which are nearby. That's a perfectly sensible approach. That's exactly what you do in Rome Total War. It's exactly the wrong strategy for Tharbad. If you play like a normal person, you're going to get wrecked because those rebel settlements are a trap. So you can succeed as Tharbad. What you need to do is play aggressively, and you need to go north, not south. And you need to hope beyond anything that Dunland is not going to turn on you, because Dunland, as you said, Dunland's a strong faction, and they may look like fur-wearing barbarians who throw pointed sticks at you, but you do not have a good answer to that as Tharbad in the early going. Your unit sizes are a lot smaller, so a lot fewer men per unit. Your strength is grinding it out toe-to-toe. Dunland is not going to allow you to do that. They're going to stand off and throw spears at you. Thin out your ranks substantially before they throw in some howling berserkers or dogs or whatever the heck else they're going to do. Also, you don't have a lot of cav as Tharbad. Your bodyguard unit is infantry. Again, that's not great versus Dunland. Their bodyguard is infantry as well, but all their units are good for carving up infantry. And your only cavalry unit, at least in the very early going, is a shieldless charging lancer-style unit, which can be very effective, but also tends to take high casualties. And your low population in your starting settlements is going to make retraining kind of a hassle. So you're going to have to manage all of that stuff. Tharbad is an extremely difficult faction, I think, to play. They get a lot going against them. So also, I mean, the fact is you're not going to do a whole lot of trade money in the early going anyway. The fact that you're going to want to expand north means that you don't have a lot of great trade provinces nearby until you get up to Bree. And if you do get up to Bree, it's because you're attacking all the factions that are up there. And so you're not going to be trading with anybody except yourself. So it's going to take a while for the population to grow for that trade to come online. Very interesting Tharbad campaign could be to go sort of a migration campaign. Go down into Gondor, go down into Harandor and Umbar, and grab the coasts. And I'd like to do this someday. Maybe that'll be my next sort of let's play. Let's go to Rune. I'm going to put them in the B tier. Rune is not a super strong faction. They're middle of the road. Maybe there's an argument to be made that maybe they're even C tier. But I think you can do well with Rune initially. There are a lot of dangers nearby, particularly Adunabar when they're controlled by the AI can be a big threat for you in the early going. But once you sort of go into Mordor a little bit, your economy is going to even out and you've got a good sort of mid-range bunch of units. It looks weird to have them here on the same line, so maybe I'm mistaken about that. All right, let's go to Dale. Dale is strong. Dale is super strong. This is what you want to play for your first campaign. That'd be my recommendation. Don't play Con for your first campaign. Play as Dale. If you're very new to the mod, Dale is a lot of fun lore-wise because they are a mannish faction who is kind of just starting out, is the idea, independently. In, I guess it's in the appendices, maybe it's in the very end of the Return of the King, but I think it's the appendices where it says that Dale sort of existed under the crown and protection of the Reunited Kingdom of Gondor and Arnor. So you could argue that the lore suggests they should be under the thumb of the Reunited Kingdom initially. And, I mean, the fact is Rome Total War just doesn't have a way to represent that at the game start. So I believe they're allied with the Reunited Kingdom, or at least there is a Reunited Kingdom diplomat right nearby, so you could make that happen if you wanted. That would be for purely roleplay purposes. I think the real appeal to Dale, though, is lore-wise playing as an up-and-coming faction, and we've represented them in the mod as the most sort of experimental faction, in a sense that they're willing to try new things, to try new technology, let's say. I don't want to give too much away. There are some fun sort of secret units you can get playing as Dale, and I think I've done some guides that get into all of that on the channel if you want to check those out, that are still quite relevant. But Dale, in addition to just the fun of playing a faction that doesn't have a super strong like history, I guess you could say, in the lore, like you're doing new things, whereas the Reunited Kingdom is just trying to hold on, right? And so you're sort of a new upstart Mannish faction. But in addition to that, you got a fantastic start. You've got a great economy. Your units are not super cheap, but you are incredibly wealthy. You start with a pretty safe neighbor in the dwarves, who are an ally initially. You've got very defensible strategic position at the start, and the factions that are near you are pretty small, so you can bully them initially and get protectorates pretty early, which can make your economy even more insane if you want to go that route, which is a lot of fun for roleplay. You can check out other videos I've done about that. And in terms of your units, they're fantastic. They're just across the board. Dale it's got the ranged stuff for people who just like to plonk like 10 units of longbowmen down and just watch, hell rain from the sky. It's got infantry grind stuff for people who like that kind of play where you're just, shoulder to shoulder against the enemy. It's got some fun, the hearth troops with two-handed axes for if you want a little meteor charge. It's got even cav. Their bodyguard cav is very strong, and they've got the capability to train some very interesting cavalry units. It's got siege weaponry, so Dale just has it all. I'm also going to include Rohan as a strong faction, though I'm going to put them actually below Dunland in what strikes me as a very amusing move. That's because I think Rohan actually is arguably a little tougher to start than Dunland. I mean, Dunland is super rich in part because it can quickly take over Rohan, and Rohan's economy becomes added to Dunland's economy. But Rohan has a bit of a trickier time, maybe, just because, let me put it this way, Dunland can take over Rohan and kind of stop at the Anduin, right? They can basically take over Rohan and just kind of hold the river. They don't need to expand beyond that, really. They can go north, they can go south into Gondor a bit, but they're going to achieve their objectives pretty much with that neat border. Rohan is going to have to go into some very unfriendly territory that's not going to give them a whole lot. So, Rohan conquering Dunland, sure, do it, you have to, but it's not as good as Dunland conquering Rohan, if that makes sense. Similarly, you're going to always have to worry about your eastern border, whether that is Adunabar causing problems for you, or taking over your initial ally, the Reunited Kingdom, or just the later factions who tend to emerge in the Brownlands, right? Maybe that's going to be a strong Beorning faction. Maybe Dale's going to get super big. Harad's probably going to come up from the south at some point. So you're going to have to manage that stuff, and you're also always going to feel pressured to protect the Reunited Kingdom if you're role-playing, right? So that's going to be a bit of a headache for you. It's possible to do. I did a Team Rohan World Police playthrough where the goal was to keep every faction on the map alive. I didn't do a super long campaign of that because after a while it was like, okay, this works. But the fact is Rohan is able to project power very widely across the map. And it's fun to do that. They're a cav faction, so you can make all cav armies and be very strong doing that. But I think Dunland still has a bit of an edge, just given the fact that you're going to tend to make more balanced armies with Dunland that are a bit easier to play, whereas cav armies can be tricky for some people to get a hang of. So I guess I'm going to put Rohan there for that purpose. Okay, North Rune. I'm going to put North Rune... I think we're going to have to put him... Let's see... I enjoy North Rune more than I enjoy Tharbad, so let me just get that out of the way. I do have a North Rune campaign currently underway. I've got to get back to it, but they're very, very tricky. There's a few things you can do. One thing is hoard up immediately and just go plunder the Dwarven Hills, the Iron Hills. You've got the Lonely Mountain. You can go plunder Dale with your horde, but then you've got the problem of being in non-homeland territory, having to train worse units than your native stuff, and then building back up to get back to your homelands. The other thing you can do is sit in your homelands and try to conquer some stuff like a normal person, but that is almost certainly going to be... I said almost certainly going to fail. That's what I was going to say, but I don't think that's true. I think it's going to be very tricky, let's say. Trickier than Tharbad? Actually, yeah, I think Tharbad is a bit easier. So even though I like North Rune better as a faction to play, just aesthetically, I'm going to say they're more challenging than Tharbad. Rovanian. Ooh, Rovanian. Rovanian is a lot like North Rune, in that they're sort of in the middle of the action. But, I mean, I'm almost tempted to do this. I don't think I'm going to seriously put them here. But there is a way to play Rovanian very strong, and that is to train 20 units of their Rovanian scouts, which is a light cav unit, and then just send those as essentially, I've seen them described on the Discord as like heat-seeking missiles. I guess that's true of any tier 1 Lancer cav, arguably. If you train a ton of them cheaply and send them at, individual units in the enemy lines, you're going to win, right, if you gang up with all your cavalry. So I'm tempted to put them here, but I don't think I will. Because it's not quite the meme level that the horse archer, low tier, cheap horse archers of Khand are. So I'm going to put them, I'm tempted to put them in could work, but it's a really hard sell. I think they belong down here. Rovanian is, at one point I thought they were, one of the 3 hardest factions in the campaign. For the first time playing Rovanian, you're going to be tempted to sit in your 3 starting provinces. You're going to maybe want to grab 1 or 2 rebel provinces which are near you, but that, like with Tharbad, is going to be a bit of a trap. So probably the best thing to do as a Rovanian is to instead attack Dale immediately and try to get that nice, rich, well-defended territory for yourself, and then get some good units along the way while you conquer Dale's former lands. And then maybe, eventually reconquer the homelands that you've almost inevitably lost to Rune, because the strategic problem, like for North Rune, is very, very tricky over there. You're just surrounded, both of these factions, by very aggressive, large enemies. There's going to be Dale. For both of these factions, Dale is going to be a problem for you, and Rune is going to be a problem for you for both of these factions. Darwinian may also try to pile on, because they've got nothing else to do. So it's going to be very tricky. Darwinian, though, I'm going to put them at a strong could work. Maybe they belong under the Beornings, though. I think the Beornings are a bit easier, just by virtue of the fact that the Beornings have more defensible lands. It's easy to play the Beornings, slightly easier in the sense that, there's a strong suggestion that you are an ambush faction. A lot of your units get bonuses fighting in the woods, and there's tons of woods, so you can set up your strategic ambushes and get a lot of bonuses. Darwinian is a little bit harder than that because they're a little more exposed. This is the smallest starting faction in the mod. They only have 2 settlements initially, and you've got 3 factions immediately that are probably going to want to kill you right off the bat. So right to your north and west, I guess mostly to the north is Dale. To your north is North Rune. To your south and west is Rovanian. Rune itself is going to come into contact with you fairly quickly. And what do? The problem as Darwinian is that you start with the best city in the area, Belligant. It's your capital. It's got those nice tier 3 wooden timber walls that ladders don't work against. So you've got some good defensibility there, but that's not the same as being able to expand easily, right? So you want to be like North Rune and Rovanian and take Belligant. You don't want to be Darwinian and take some crappy North Rune village, right? That's kind of the problem. So probably for Darwinian, the best move is like it is for almost everybody else in the area, go to Dale and see what you can do there. But Darwinian, despite being the smallest faction in the mod, I think does have a little more intuitive military than some of these others. Like Harandor's military is very skirmishy in the early years. You've got skirmish cav, you've got skirmish foot. Those can be very effective, but they can be tricky to use. Adunabar, you're spoiled for choice. That itself maybe is a bit of a analysis paralysis problem. Tharbad's got some weird stuff, very infantry focused like Darwinian, but Darwinian I think just has stronger units than Tharbad, or at least they seem to play that way when I've played them. And it could be that the neighbors of Darwinian are just softer than the neighbors of Tharbad, right? Unlike Tharbad, Darwinian is not surrounded by a bunch of, spear-armed Dunlandings that can just murder you from 30 yards away and then close in with an axe and a war cry on their lips. So Darwinian, I think, does have a bit more of a challenge in that regard. Tharbad does. Darwinian, does have lots of factions. There's lots of strategic problems, and you want to pick your enemies very carefully, but it could work. Very fun, very good sort of challenge campaign. Then we've got the elves. The elves are also a challenge. So I'm going to have to put them up here just because I feel like Khand can't be up here by itself. But understand that they're low, right? So the elves, I'm going to put... if they didn't have some weird stuff about them, I would put them down here on the low end of could work. Because if you play them normally and sort of slowly try to expand, it's gonna be a hard time. The elves are very good on the defense, and their units are quite good, but the problem is, of course, population and economy. You won't be able to retrain your units or train them very well. Your lands are far separated from one another, so reinforcements are tough. For the most part, you've got like 3 zones. You've got like the Lorien zone, you've got the Northern Mirkwood zone, and then you've got the Mythland area, which is mostly safe. The Grey Havens you can mostly ignore for a while, but you do need to get to Rivendell, right? Well, speaking of getting to Rivendell, what you're going to use is Glorfindel for that. So if you are aware that you are given the most powerful unit of cavalry and the most powerful unit in the entire game right at the beginning in the unit of Glorfindel that starts near Mythland, then you can wreak havoc with him, and you want to wreak havoc with him because the Elven campaign is a race against time. And the clock that is ticking is the clock on Glorfindel's life. 4th Age Total War is set up using the base Rome EXE, which means that units, family members die of old age. But mechanically, we reflavored it so that for the elves, those units are going across the sea. Glorfindel, of course, has been in Middle-earth for a few thousand years or so, and he's not going to want to stick around too long into the 4th Age. This is the age of icky men. So he's going to sail away, and you've got 10 turns, 20 turns with him. So make good use of them. Get him with a very tiny army. Get like the strongest units in Mythland, probably those Lindon Guard, because if they just sit in the Grey Havens, they've got a ridiculous upkeep, and you want them fighting to earn their pay. And then send him into the east. You could take over the Shire and get your economy problems sorted out pretty quickly if you don't like role-playing. You could attack the Reunited Kingdom, which in many ways would simplify things. If you take a Numinas and then Bree, you've got a better economy again. Or you could do the more role-play-friendly thing, which is go to Rivendell, take Adunabar down a peg along the way, get the settlement of 3 ways. And Rivendell is actually an important settlement to take as the elves because it gives you a fantastic cavalry unit that is almost as good as Glorfindel. These are the Rivendell, I can't remember, Imladris Lancers. Fantastic unit, takes a long time to get them, so use Glorfindel to get there and see what can be done. But just understand that this is a very, very tricky campaign. Okay, Harad. I'm really torn about this. I think Harad maybe belongs in the beefy category. Maybe there's an argument to be made that they're strong. But Harad, unlike some of these other strong factions, Harad suffers from being very spread out, and in some ways being the target, I guess, of a lot of bad guys. So you've got Far Harad to your east, along with Khand, and then to your north you've got Harondor and the Reunited Kingdom. Now you're not really directly bordering the Reunited Kingdom initially, but functionally you are, because they are going to send ships down to you. Is what I'm trying to say. They're going to send boats. And that's going to mess up your trade and stuff like that. And plus, you're just going to want to attack them anyway. So you're going to have to manage, basically your surrounded kind of situation with borders that are not as friendly as they are for even like Rohan, which has a lot of rivers and mountain passes and things that they can work to their advantage. With Harad, you do have river passes, but the problem is you're going to be the one punching through them for the most part, right? Like, you're going to have to be aggressive into Harondor and into Far Harad early. The easiest start for Harad, I think, is to just pummel your 2 other Haradrian neighbors, pummel Harondor and pummel Far Harad, and then make them your protectorate. You throw money at them until they go away, basically. And then you've got buffers, right? You can use those 2 factions to shore up your northern and eastern borders, essentially, while you put together an army to invade Gondor. So that's a lot of fun. But that's probably not the way most people are going to play. So they'd be somewhere in between here. But I'm going to put them here for just the, I don't know, for the ease of use for the most common denominator, let's say. Yeah, and yes, I think I would put them slightly above the Reunited Kingdom in that they have some units which are extremely versatile and relatively cost-effective. And I'm talking especially about the Swords of Harad. This is a tier 2, I think. Sword unit with javelins. It's basically like little mini Roman legionaries. They throw their spears and then they charge in, and there's, I think, on the settings that I play, they're like 80 mana unit, something along those lines. But they're good, you know, in terms of both their stats and in terms of the unit size. So that means that they can really make short work of the Reunited Kingdom. So any unit with like javelins like that, which are pretty easy to work as a player, you just put them on fire at will and kind of they run themselves, can, to me, give them the edge. Dwarves. Dwarves are in a similar situation to the elves, but they don't have the little gimmicky stuff, right? They don't have easy access to cav. They don't have like settlements that you can go secretly and get cool stuff. Actually, they do. You can go to essentially Isengard and get guns if you want to get some guns. We hid them there so that people wouldn't you know, complain, I guess, about lore breaking. But if you want to do that, you can. But the Dwarven Blunderbuss unit does not put it in S tier, right? That is a fun unit, but it's not Glorfindel. It's not even Horse Archers, right? It's for fun. So I don't know if they qualify as strong, honestly, because their strategic situation with the dwarves is a lot like that of the elves. They have a lot to manage. They get a lot of problems. Your Blue Mountain settlements are basically safe for a very, very long time. But you start off with eastern settlements that are under threat. You've got Dale potentially to worry about. If you leave the Lonely Mountain vulnerable, just know that you do start off allied with Dale, but they are an AI faction, and they're going to be very happy to seize upon weakness. And then you don't start with Moria. You may notice that if you're playing any other faction, the dwarves start with Moria in their possession, but when you're the player as the dwarves, you do not, so you have to go conquer it. So for that reason, I might put them down on the low end of beefy, or maybe in the high end of could work, and maybe realistically, maybe they should be a bit lower down. I think they have an easier time than Adunabar, but maybe not so easy as Harandor. And to me, it comes down to the mid-game blues with the dwarves. The early game is fun, right? You're defending settlements. You can do really well in that capacity because your units are very strong defensively, but you don't have a lot of range. You don't have any mobility to speak of, so you need to hire mercenaries to provide, you know, archers and cav. And until you branch out, you're going to just feel kind of stuck. So they're a challenge and don't provide, I think, the same sort of hard, fast hitting stuff that the elves do. All right, and then finally, Harad we're going to put in the don't category, but I'm going to put them above Tharbad simply because you've got some very interesting units to work with. I haven't done a Let's Play of Harad, but it's absolutely on my list for wanting to do that. You can take down Mumakil with your tier 1 units, your skirmishers. They're a lot of fun. And several of your early tier units are fear-causing as well. So it's a fun campaign. Your units look weak on paper, but in practice they can be super strong because of that fear effect, because of the javelins, because of the strength of some of those units. It's just that strategically it is a rush for Umbar, essentially. Harad has no borders to speak of, so you've got like 3 settlements that are very far from one another, and if Khand comes down to harass you, you're going to have to hold them off while also dealing with a hostile, gigantic empire of Harad. So it can be done, but you know, you're probably going to want to leave it for a future campaign. All right, let me know what you think about this. Obviously, this is very idiosyncratic, but yeah, we'll get to another video in the future. See you until then.